bottlenecks were making it lumpy, uneven, or as we call it, lopsided development. And given the lopsided development, it was activating as and when these bottlenecks were resolving themselves and working in quite an ad hoc manner. This has been highlighted in our report. The base case forecast was 50 gigawatt, and in a high case, we anticipated 3 gigawatt to be further unlocked in case the state budgets and the CNI budgets were unlocked to open that demand. However, in the lower case, if we talk about 48 gigawatt was somewhat anticipated, coming from some of the cancellations in the existing 8.6 gigawatt of pipeline, and also from completely the state demand evaporating. If we talk about the situation which is after COVID, we are anticipating or we are gravitating somewhere towards the low case forecast of 48 gigawatts and more loading of the capacity in 2021 as the projects in 2020 were getting delayed. The report, India Wind Outlook 2022, looking beyond headwinds, has been structured to help the reader or reflect the reader what happened in the India wind market in the last 2 years and how an unplanned or ad hoc capacity award led to choking of new capacity deployment. It talks about demand and economics being the fundamental drivers for wind installation in India towards 2022. And it further deep dives into all of these three segments, which is the central, state, and CNI market, to talk about how each market segment functions and what are the unique challenges within each of it. With this, I hand over the presentation to the panel discussion. Hope you find the report an interesting read. Thank you so much and stay safe.
Thanks, Swarnim. Thank you, Swarnim. It was very interesting, and you have set this report very nicely. It reflects the points which were highlighted in the report. With this note, I just wanted to hand out to Joyce. She will take it and just to moderate the session. Over to you, Joyce.
Thank you so much, Jay, and thank you to Swarnim for very clearly outlining the fundamental growth drivers as well as the challenges that we are seeing coming up in the next 3 years for India's wind market. And just as a reminder, the report does do a deep dive into these areas and is available on the GWEC website, gwec.net. So we encourage you to please go and download it and give it a read. My name is Joyce Lee. I'm the Policy and Operations Director at Global Wind Energy Council, one of the co-authors of the India Wind Outlook Towards 2022 report. And I will be moderating the roundtable session on the webcast today. Before I introduce our esteemed participants of the roundtable, I do want to send out a gentle reminder that the Q&A button is available for you on the ribbon of your Zoom platform. I will be posing a few questions that came up in previous webcasts as well as in our dialogues with different stakeholders in the market over the past few weeks. But we will have a portion for an open Q&A where we'll be taking questions from our audience. So if you do have a question on your mind while we're speaking, please do share it in the Q&A chat box. And we'll be looking at those on the back end and making sure that we address them in the next portion of this webcast. So we're very lucky to have with us 3 experts of India's wind markets, and I'll introduce them one by one before going into the discussion. We have with us Siddharth Jain, who is one of the founders, and he is a managing director of Mech Intelligence. This is a leading consultancy with offices in India and Denmark, working on maritime technology as well as clean energy. We also have with us Feng Zhao, who is the strategy director at Global Wind Energy Council with deep experience and insight into the global supply side and supply chain of the global wind industry. And then we have with us Mr. UB Reddy, who is the managing director of Enerfa Projects in India with more than 25 years of experience in project development for wind projects. So I think we're well covered here to cover the questions and the challenges facing the market today. And I wanted to start by heading off a question I know is on the front of everyone's mind, which is regarding COVID-19 and the impact on India's wind market. So I wanted to pose this first to Feng. With the expected downgrade and impact of COVID-19 and the expected reduction to new installations that we will likely see for 2020, how will this affect the India wind market? How will this impact the very ambitious targets that the Indian government has set for wind, which, as a reminder, include 60 gigawatts of onshore capacity and 5 gigawatts of offshore capacity by 2022?
Thank you for your question, Joyce. So let me first start with the impact of COVID-19 on the supply chain in India. In general, I think the challenge remains there. We got the lockdown start from April, and then the extension has been further extended. Now the government will have the lockdown strict regulation imply until the end of May. We don't know if situation will be improved. So therefore, so from the supply side, we believe that there will be an impact. Looking at the India market, absolutely, because India is one of the manufacturing hubs for the wind industry. So anything impact there will have the impact on the domestic installation. On top of that, we will see the further impact due to the lockdown in India on other markets as well on the global level. So back to the second part of your question, and we do know, yeah, there is an ambitious target renewable wise, 175 gigawatt for both onshore, offshore, and looking at wind alone, 60 onshore wind plus offshore, there is a target of 5 gigawatt by 2023. I mean, the target alone, I think it's encouraging. Looking at the target in Europe and where else in the whole world, we do need the government target. I mean, for renewable, long-term perspective, we do appreciate this visibility. That's a good signal. But looking at where we are today in India, 60 gigawatt onshore, that's the target by 2020. But looking at how many gigawatt we have by the year end 2019, we only have 37.5 gigawatt, which means to reach a target for the next 3 years, including 2020, each year we need to have 7.5 gigawatt. But is that going to be realistic? I don't think so, based on the situation. Even without thinking about the impact of COVID-19, 7.5 is already challenging, which has been clearly identified, mentioned in the report GY co-developed with MEC Intelligence. So now we have to put another layer of the impact that's COVID-19 on top of the general situation. So this is really challenging situation. But for the supply chain itself, based on experience in market, not just in Asia Pacific like China, we're looking at the situation in some of the established market in Europe, like Germany. It is possible to scale up the annual installation from, for example, I take Germany, for example. It is possible to scale up the annual installation from 2 gigawatt into 6 gigawatt within 1 year. But looking at the case of India, I'm not doubt about the capacity from the supply side, but it's mainly due to the challenges that our presenter Swami mentioned earlier in this call. Without solve the challenge in the entire market, it's really hard to reach your target. I think that's my general comment on it. Thank you, Joyce.
Great, thanks, Feng. So I think it's fair to say that it will be quite a stretch to meet those ambitious targets. And I wanted to follow up with you on one thing before I move to the other panelists, which is from the regional point of view, are you seeing any any competitive forces affecting the supply chain on a region-wide basis. I mean, we know that much supply chain activity is nested within China, for instance. Do you foresee a shift of any activity to other supply chain hubs like India?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Joe. You know, this is just a big picture in terms of this, you know, one of the hot topic we discussed yesterday on our global offshore webcast that's regarding this, you know, anti-globalization and also the shift of capacity, you know, from China to some other country like India. But looking at the wind industry specifically, I think we need to look at case by case. For India, we have the big target for both wind and the solar PV. Solar PV and wind, that's slightly different, even though they both are renewable. But looking at wind alone, I'm pretty sure that the leading European suppliers, they are going to rethink about their global supply chain strategy, which has been already mentioned by some of the leading suppliers. You know, when the COVID-19 pandemic started in China, and we have the leading international turbine OEM, Vestas, SGRE, GE, start review the strategy, trying to utilize India as an alternative solution to save the challenging. And then the plan has got on hold due to the pandemic. But again, it is remain as the challenging situation in India due to the lockdown, but this cannot prevent, you know, the turbine OEM or component supplier from thinking about how to rebalance their global footprint and the strategy. So from my side, I believe that we will see India play much more important roles in terms of the manufacturing hubs and also export component and the turbines to start from the regions in Asia Pacific, because we're going to see the increase of the turbine installation, you know, Southeast of Asia, including Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, for example, and also it is possible to cover the demand in Australia, which is a booming market, looking at the pipeline over there. Again, you know, there is an opportunity for India, the supply chain, to increase their important roles in terms of manufacturing, exporting, etc. But we have to think about the situation regarding what's the impact for local producer, turbine OEM suppliers. Right now, the situation is that looking at the market share in India, we see the local supplier, you know, under the stress right now. In 2019, we only have the turbine installed by local supplier Suzlon, Inox. They are, and Sengling installed a few turbines, and now the brand will be disappeared next year. So looking at the India market right now, so it is a challenge situation for turbine OEMs. Our new data, which will be released next week, we can see the global top 6 turbine OEM already holding 72.5% of global market share. That's another 1.9% increase on the previous year, which means the bigger become larger, stronger, better. So therefore, if you don't have the global footprint, which means a lot of challenge, so that's exactly the situation for the local India supplier. So therefore, we need to looking at the case specifically. So that's my comment regarding the impact of Huawei or the general market competition on the outlook from the supply chain for India. Thank you, Joy.
Great, thanks, Feng. That's really interesting. And I wanted to bring Yubi in now with the project development perspective. Clearly, cost pressures have been accentuated by the COVID-19 pandemic across the value chain. Regarding the reduction of wind tariffs even further to something like declining further by 7%, as reflected in our report. Is this trend sustainable considering the margins for EPCs and OEMs are already narrowing?
Thanks, Joyce. Thanks, thanks, Jay, for organizing this seminar. Thanks, MSc Consultants, for putting together a good, excellent report. To answer the question, let me start by saying that in the past, the feed-in tariffs have helped the Indian wind industry to grow. And this is definitely acknowledged by everyone, including the government. But however, it was thought that the feed-in tariffs were not rational. And that is how the auction-based mechanism was introduced to determine tariffs. So auction-based mechanism, especially the reverse auctions, are a test to the RE industry in the country. So when the auctions were introduced in the year early February 2017, the industry encouraged it and they were happy to participate. And as a part of the SECI 1 bid, the industry participated with all the enthusiasm and vigor. And the tariff that was discovered, in my opinion, was very appropriate and realistic. And once the new tariff got discovered, and this tariff was much lower than the feed-in tariffs that were followed in the country. And so with the new discovery, all the projects were with feed-in tariffs were either suspended or cancelled. So SECI 1 happened in the year February 2017, and between the SECI, that was the first bid, and between the bid 1 of SECI 1 and to the SECI 2 bid, which happened in October 2017, there was an 8 months gap. Now, within these 8 months, actually, like many things happened. One, the feed-in tariff projects, which were ongoing projects, which were suddenly stopped, were stalled. The other hand, the SECI 1 was only 1,000 megawatts, and only 1,000 got blocked as far as the OEMs were concerned. And within this 8 months, like there a lot of inventory got piled up. As many of you are aware, like in India, like during the FIT regime, the turbine manufacturers never linked the manufacturing to a specific order from the customer. Every OEM had annual targets, and they went ahead and procured the raw material, and the manufacturing happened independently. So is the case in terms of procurement of land, approvals, etc., etc. So in the year 2017, the Indian market did very well. We did about 5 gigawatts of installations. And so industry was expecting that like in the subsequent year, the growth trajectory would be maintained. So there were a lot of plans which the OEMs or the EPC companies had made for the year 2017. But when FIT projects got stalled, and between the first auction to the second auction, with an 8 months gap, when people had to participate in the bids, the turbine manufacturers had a lot of inventory with them. So because of this, the tariff from 346, which was the SECI 1 tariff, it fell to 264 in SECI 2. And between SECI 2 to SECI 3, the tariffs further fell to 244. So when the tariffs started dropping steeply, a perception got created that the turbine manufacturers have a lot of profits, and there's a huge padding in cost. And so the government also thought that this has to be regulated. But the ground reality is completely different. So if the tariffs have fallen from 346 to 243 or 244, it was primarily because the ongoing projects with FIT got cancelled. The manufacturers had huge inventory with them, and so they had to liquidate the inventory, and so it was more of a distress sale. So in view of this, they had to actually offer the projects at a lower cost. But if the perception, if you had to believe that it was true that manufacturers had huge margins in the business, so let us look at the health of the OEMs today. In the year 2014, we had 20 OEMs in the country. And today, with the introduction of auctions, we are left with 3 or 4 active OEMs. Now, there are many OEMs who got benefited with this auction market are also struggling. The EPC companies are bleeding. The component manufacturers are running their manufacturing facilities half empty. The logistic companies, the contractors, whether civil, electrical, etc., etc. This is a long story. Like no one is healthy. So the situation is not very conducive for the wind industry. Unfortunately, the health of the wind industry today is benchmarked with the number of projects which IPP bids. So this auction market has definitely benefited. It has helped to discover the realistic tariffs. As I mentioned, the SECI 1, when the tariff of 346 was discovered, in my opinion, that was a realistic tariff. It was a healthy tariff that would actually protect every stakeholder in the value chain. But today, like going after low tariffs, to expect that tariff should drop further, and sadly comparing the made in India products of wind energy with imported products of solar energy is also not appropriate. So the wind has done its best in the past, and today with these low tariffs, the industry cannot sustain. So we need to relook and have a complete revival of the policy. And the bidding as such does not give any visibility, any certainty to the business. Today, the OEM or an EPC company will have to calibrate their capex cost with the newly discovered tariff. Only after a bilateral agreement is arrived between the OEM and the bid winner, the OEM can start actually manufacturing. And added to this, we have very stringent timelines of 18 or 21 months. Now, within this 21 months, the industry doesn't have any controls on the approval process. There are very cumbersome approval process. So it is very difficult to get even acquire land. So today, within the 21 months, OEM or an EPC company will have to buy land and get approvals, then construct and commission the wind farms. And this is not practical. And in the whole process, the entire cash flows are going haywire. The working capital requirements are going up. And this is leading further problems to the OEMs or the EPC companies. So in my view, expecting that the tariffs will go down further is impractical, and it is suicidal for the wind industry in India. So rather we need to focus, like, yes, as I mentioned, I'll come back again here, like, yes, the feed-in tariffs were not rational. It was a good move by the government to introduce auctions, but those corrections, whatever was necessary, was achieved in the SECI 1 itself. So have a bid, now the bidding has served its purpose. Now, if we have to achieve the targets of 60 gigawatts, I think we need to have more certainty to the business. So for which I would request the government to start engaging with more stakeholders within the industry and not limit their discussions and engagement with few IPPs.
Yeah, so I think it sounds like the expectations for cost as well as timing are going to be difficult to deliver on in the context of these government targets of 60 gigawatts by 2022. And I think we've mainly focused on the cost pressures on, the supply side and the IPPs, but I wanted to also address the cost pressures on the DISCOM side, on the off-takers. Payment risk and liquidity are perennial challenges in the Indian wind market. But we've recently seen a proposal for 900 billion of a relief program for DISCOMs, as well as amendments to the Electricity Act, which are meant to strengthen the tariff regime, including the setup of a contract enforcement authority for power. Let's turn to Siddharth at Mech Intelligence. And Siddharth, I wanted to ask, how are these two measures, the DISCOM Relief Program and the Electricity Act amendments, going to work or fall short of resolving payment issues and helping wind IPPs?
Thank you, Feng, and thank you, GVAC, for organizing this webinar, and looking forward to a good discussion. So, the liquidity measure that has been announced is basically a soft loan towards state governments, and they have to fulfill a couple of conditions to be able to access this soft loan. The first condition is that they have to clear all their pending bills in a stipulated time. And the second thing is that they have to give an affidavit where they have to undertake that all the subsidy payments towards electricity consumers as well as these generators that need to be paid on time. Now, considering that the financial situation has deteriorated in the country and the state budgets have been primarily hit hard, it remains to be seen, to what extent would they be open in taking extra liability over and above what they have, no matter if it's a soft loan, and to what extent will they have the budget to pay these, future subsidies on time. So it remains to be seen whether this liquidity will actually be taken up by some of the discoms and the state governments as we go along. In terms of the amendments to the Electricity Act, we welcome both the changes, that is, the charges which are towards subsidizing some of the consumers need to go off, and there is a contract enforcement authority that should be made. We welcome both the changes, but we are also awaiting how these will be implemented going forward. For example, the intention to reduce the charges has been there since Electricity Act 2003. It is still pending, and we wait how these will come in the future. Now, but we believe that the amendment has missed the most important shift in the structure of the electricity market, which is to shift the power or the choice from the intermediary to the consumer. We believe that if the consumers are empowered and they are completely made free to be able to choose the power supplier based on the quality, the price, and whatever mode of energy that they provide, it would be a much bigger reform that can free up the woes of the sector forever, because then there will be a lot of unburdening and unbundling of the sector, which will free up the resources to meet the obligations towards generators. This provision was there in the Electricity Act of 2019, the amendment that was proposed in 2019, but has been taken out in 2020. We were surprised, and we hope that that comes back again, because that is a fundamental reform which will completely change the market.
Thank you, Siddharth. Yubi, did you want to respond?
One small observation. Okay, while I welcome this move of 90,000 crores that the government has earmarked for the discoms, this is very good. But at the same time, okay, in the long run, discoms will have to be on their own, and they cannot every time depend upon the center to come to the rescue. So having said that, one just comment on what Siddharth just mentioned on the reforms related to the consumer versus the generator, consumer allowing the consumer to choose the power, etc. So my view is that, like, see, this is more a Western model, and for a country like India, I think this is something which is not practical. So we have other challenges in the country, and I think it is time to address those challenges at the moment. So I'm not getting into the details. But what Siddharth mentioned is good. It appears good, rather, for a country like India. But practically, when we have to actually implement, we'll have much more challenges in implementing it. So I think maybe that's one reason, like, this amendment has been taken out from the draft, which is now there with the government.
Thank you, Yubi. Let's approach this issue of low tariffs from a slightly different angle. And here I would raise the recent SECI round the clock, or RTC, tender for solar power, which resulted in a very low tariff of 2.9 INR per kilowatt hour. And that was picked up by Renew Power. This one can be taken by any of our participants here. How might these round-the-clock tenders impact future growth in the wind market? Would there be scope for pickup among hybrid projects, for instance? Maybe if I could turn to Siddharth first, and then I'll come to you, Yubi. I can see your mic is on as well.
Yeah, I think the major change that this new RTC tender has done is change the perception of renewables in India. Both for from being considered as an intermittent source to being considered as an important part of the energy basket, where the power can be supplied round the clock. This is not firm power, but still it is it's available for around 80% of the time. So that's quite good. The second is that the price at which this has come, this has created a lot of optimism that renewable energy will play a central role going forward in the volumes. Already, if you look at what is notified by the government, we see around 9 gigawatt of tenders which are either hybrid or storage or peak power or blended with coal that are already notified, which needs to be concluded. So there is some sort of change in the government's thinking which can be reflected. So this kind of points towards that. The only consideration regarding the price is that this tender was kind of invited by two specific entities in India. We have to still see what is the acceptance of this sort of pricing with an escalation in the discoms at general, whether they will be willing to sign power supply agreement. But I believe that that's a lower risk because this is quite low as compared to coal power. And if there is a choice between coal and renewables at this price point, discoms should come around.
Thank you. Yubi, would you like to respond?
So I agree with what Siddharth mentioned. So I too welcome this RTC tenders which are coming up. But let me say that this 290 is not a fixed tariff. I think the winner actually has a 3% escalation year on year. So that makes this tariff very attractive. Thereby, I think like as compared to a standalone tariffs, what we are talking about, which I commented in my first question you asked. So this tariff is pretty good as compared to this. So because of the 3% escalation, which goes on up to the 15th year. So from the 16th year to the 25th year, they have a fixed tariff. The 15th year tariff would be considered as a tariff for the rest of 10-year period. So this is a good tariff, and congratulations to Renew Power. I think they've done a fantastic work on this particular bit. And so moving forward, I think more tenders would come up, but it is not a RTC solar tender. I think GVAC, we should be a little careful, and we should rather call it an RTC wind tender, if not an RTC tender. Thank you.
Thanks. We will take this on board. We have time for one more question within our roundtable discussion, and then we have lots of questions from our audience coming in, so we'll move directly into the open Q&A after this. Siddharth, I'm going to give you the honor of fielding our very last question of the roundtable, and let's address the corporate PPA market in India. How significant do you see C&I in being a growth driver? Swarnim did address this as a area to watch in her section of the presentation. Can you speak a little bit about whether there's a framework there to really support and drive the bilateral market?
Yes. So it's a well-known fact that corporates in India, industries in India pay the highest amount of tariff. It can go from 2 times to 5 to 6 times of what the consumer in general is paying. So there is a lot of room when you see it from top down, that what is the cost benefit a corporate can get by installing a captive power plant or a renewable energy power plant and signing a PPA directly. But the problem is the charges and the regulations that come as a result of signing some of these contracts. These are there are some charges which are legitimate, like transmission and wheeling charges, but there are also charges which are arbitrary, which is cross subsidy and additional surcharges, which form the bulk of the tariff that a customer would pay if they were to sign a corporate PPA. And there is no such framework as yet to kind of remove these tariffs to make a playing field. The more important question here is that if what is the position of wind going to be with regard to solar, and how the supply chain will bring the cost down. Because if I am a corporate or industrial customer and I am trying to reduce my cost, and if solar is going to give me more cost savings, then I would prefer to install a solar C&I plant. Our estimates last year were that solar C&I would be around 2 gigawatt market. Due to COVID, this year it's 1.4. Wind as compared to is around 0.4 gigawatt and would probably be lesser if there was no renewable purchase obligations. So corporate PPA market is an area to watch depending upon how the policy wakes up and the how the supply chain reacts to this segment of the market.
Great, thank you very much, Siddharth. And thank you to all our participants for taking part in this very engaging and interesting roundtable discussion. I think we touched on lots of interesting points, market trends, large and small, from regional supply side consolidation to the guiding hand of low tariffs and whether we can rely on that to really deliver the ambition of the government's wind targets. Now I want to hand it back to Jay, who will help facilitate the Q&A and give our audience a chance to ask our experts about what growth looks like from here on. So Jay, I'll hand it to you.
Yeah, thank you, Joyce. It was very nice. And thank you all the speakers. We have an interesting question, and we have one interesting question from our friend Hemant. Could you post your question to our panelist? Hello? Hemant, can you hear? I think we just lost it. Hemant is asking a question. Out of close 12 gigawatts bidding volume approved, how much gigawatts of bid has been cancelled by the bid winners? Could you take this question, Siddharth?
Yes, we see that the NTPC tender has been cancelled, but there are also some projects in the pipeline which are at risk. So we expect that some projects in the pipeline which have been extraordinarily delayed, around 1 gigawatt more could be at risk even before COVID that was hitting. So around 900 megawatt from NTPC and another 1 gigawatt, which is not yet announced, but there is a lot of delay that we see on the ground that could be impacted.
Okay. The next question I have from Pranav. Pranav, would you like to come online to address this question?
Yes, sure,
Okay.
sir, sure.
Go ahead, Pranav.
Yeah, my question is to all the panelists that how will the next generation of turbines look like? From a logistics and the crane rental perspective, we invest a lot on equipments that is used for the movement of WTGs and installation. So in every 2 to 3 years, we see the size and dimension of the size and weight of the turbines changing. So we want to know, it is not being viable for us to invest just for 2 years time frame. So we want to understand how will the next generation of turbines look like, and what will be the major disruption, in terms of logistics and the crane rental perspective.
Okay. Ben, would you like to take it, or
Yeah,
maybe?
I think I can take this question.
Right.
First
Okay.
of all, thank
Go
you.
ahead. Yeah, thank you. Pranav?
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you for your question, Pranav. So regarding the next generation of the turbine, which probably will be installed in India, I have the historic data in front of me here. So for 2019, the average turbine size installed in India is 2.16 megawatt. So that's 2,163 kilowatt. A year ago,
right.
It's the turbine size. It's just past the 2 megawatt milestone. Over the years, from the data I can see, the average turbine size among those established wind market throughout the world, India ranking it's the lowest rate. So I think start from a couple of years ago, you could say maybe I think 3-4 years ago, I think 3, from what I know, even Suslow, a local player, I know they are talking about something bigger than 3, but so far I can see the data we have here internally, the standard, the most popular size of the turbine installed last year, I think it's 2.1. That's SGRE 114 rotor diameter. And we have Vistas installed mainly 2 megawatt, and GE 2.4, and Senven 2.3. Yeah, Susum here, it's mainly 2.1 megawatt. So in general, we can see, looking at the annual growth trends of the global market, we don't believe, at least from GWAC market intelligence point of view, we don't see the dramatic drop of the jump of the market from the 2.x platform into 4 megawatt platform. That's what we saw here in Europe. In Europe, I could tell you the new data indicates that the average turbine size is already 3.6 megawatt. That's mainly due to a couple of challenges here. In Europe, we have the challenge in terms of land, and so due to a lot of NIMBY not in the backyard, so they have to develop a turbine OEM. They have to work together with larger size model. Situation is slightly different in the world. 3 major market: China, United States, and India, where you have relatively open space available for turbine installation. So the data indicate here, as I said, India is lowest, 2.1 megawatt last year. China 2.4. United States slightly higher, 2.5. But again, from the supply chain point of view, looking at the growth trends, with the data we haven't released yet, but I could tell you the most popular size range globally 2019, that's between 2 megawatt to 2.9 megawatt. So that's remain the mainstream product, more than 53% global market share. So back to India, I think it's going to take a while. I think there was slightly the turbine will be replaced from, or will grow. The average turbine size will grow from the 2.x into 3.x. So that's how we see on market with relatively open space. So regarding the dimension, etc., I would rather leave this question to our panelist, Ms. Reddy. From the developer IPP perspective, is there any challenge we have in India if we will replace the standard turbine, let's say 2.x in India, immediately with larger size, 3.x, 4.x? Thank you. Can you help a bit, Ms. Reddy? Thank you.
Okay. See, this question what Pranav has raised is very relevant today because with this bids happening and the government chasing low tariffs, the turbine models are also fast changing. So every leading turbine manufacturer in India in the last 1 year has rather introduced more than one model. Now, this is causing problem not only to the logistic companies or the other stakeholders, it is also causing problem across the value chain. See, it's always easy to bring in a new model, but at the same time, like to calibrate every activity of wind business to the new model has challenges, not only in terms of efforts to put up a turbine at the site, but also in terms of cost aspects. So right now, as you rightly said, like we have turbines ranging from 2.1 to 2.5 megawatt, which are installed in India, but there are certain OEMs in India who are already talking about 2.7 to 2.9 megawatt turbines. But I hope, I think the industry should stabilize around 2.9 megawatts for a couple of years. So this would actually help every stakeholder to stabilize their business and sustain for future. So from the construction point of view, I don't see a big risk. Our roads are quite comfortable enough, wide enough to transport. We have cranes, but of course in limited quantity. But I think those can be addressed. The bigger question is the viability factor, because every time we change a model, I think the economics also takes a beating. So it's better to stabilize on one or two models and build business based on them. For which actually, like, this is where I call the certainty to the business or the visibility to the business, which the bids are not offering.
Thank you, Reddy. And I have a question from Srikanth Sarangamani. Srikanth, are you there online? So we can take the question.
Yeah, Jay, yeah, very much. And thanks for organizing this webinar. And I have a question regarding why this recently the informed the bid for 12,000 megawatt for the CPSU doesn't include wind, because wind is already a matured market, and from our industry's opinion, this should have been included, and I request the organizers to take some effective steps to include this in the upcoming.
Reddy, I think the question what he was asking is, the recent 12 gigawatts which the CPUC was been announced by the minister. But I think during the discussion, they also mentioned now they like to consider wind and solar during the conversation. Reddy, would you like to take up this further?
Yeah, okay. It's a good question, brother. In fact, this question was also brought up by Mr. Tulsi Tanti in the meeting with the Honorable Minister. And the Minister now has agreed to also include wind as a part of the PSU bids. But this is good decision from the Minister. It's a course correction. But however, like, why was wind taken out? That's a big question. Wind is a made in India product. So instead of promoting made in India product, why are we going after imported products? Prime Minister Modi has very clearly stated in one of his recent addresses that be vocal about local. So wind is a local product. So I would strongly agree with Mr. Srikanth that MNRE or the PSU actually should have included wind, and wind should have been their first priority rather than an imported products from abroad. So nevertheless, the minister has stepped in, and I think he is getting it corrected. So wind will also have an opportunity to participate.
Thank you, Reddy sir. Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, we have a question from Mr. Karan. Karan ji, are you there? Okay, I think he's not there. So the question what he was asking is to ABC. What do you expect the projection shown in the in the report going to be happening, and what is the situation? How is going to help? He's talking about the market and the discount bailout, which the 900 crores which you had been talking about. Could you, Siddharth, would you like to say he's looking after beyond 22? That's what his question is in nutshell.
Yeah, so in beyond 22, I think that in 2023, if the tariff, waive-offs, the transmission charges waive-offs are not reinstated, then there will be a drop for some time. But the value of wind cannot be denied in the energy basket of India, because it is congruent with the price as well as the demand for peak power in India, which is during the morning and evening hours. When wind is producing, then the demand is also high. So it will be a very essential element of the energy basket of India, and government has also, that's why, put up a big target. They want to add another 100 gigawatt. But I think the trajectory of this would be dependent upon, to a large extent, how much the government is able to put in terms of evacuation infrastructure on the ground to access power from all the wastelands, and how do they manage the grid to be able to do that, apart from the efforts that the supply chain would make to reduce the cost.
Okay, thank you. I have a question from Sundar. This is to Reddy. He's asking how many megawatts likely to get commissioned in the auction tender in next 2 years in reality?
Yeah, so our pace projections, as Swanim was also mentioning, was around 10 gigawatt between 2019 December to 2022 March, and then we are hoping that some of these would come from the 2022-2020 auctions that have been conducted so far. That is from SECI 2 to SECI 9, and then some of that would be tendered going forward, because some new tenders would be coming.
Good. Reddy sir, would you like to add something on this?
Sundar knows the industry's status. So in the year 16-17, we did 5,500 megawatts.
Yep.
17-18, we did 1,700 megawatts. 18-19, we did 1,400 megawatts. 19-20, we have done 2,100 megawatts. So the industry does not have a magic wand to completely change this from today to 2022. So the trends will continue. I think it will improve a bit, but let us not be very optimistic on high numbers because okay, the bids have happened, but at the same time, there are a lot of challenges on ground, whether in terms of land, in terms of evacuation, the local issues, financing problems, many. So taking all the issues into consideration, I am little pessimistic in terms of how much can actually get done. So it also depends on how soon we get over the COVID crisis, because today the industry is shut. So how long this will continue, we don't know. When the labor would come back, we don't know. So there are multiple issues. So I would keep my fingers crossed. I will not like to commit a number.
Yeah, thank you. I think this timing running out, and we definitely will be answering the questions through the email. But before closing down, I'd like to take a last question from Chirag. Chirag, could you just post your question, Chirag?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. So my question was with respect to the reliability of the existing installations.
Yeah. Could you just address to who this is?
I think Mr. UB Reddy would be the appropriate person for this.
Okay.
Yeah. Could you just address? Yeah.
Okay.
Tell me the question, Siddharth.
So my question was with respect to the existing installations. What are your opinion about the reliability with respect to those, and if there is any specific technology or any area within the existing installations that need attention to? Thank you.
Great. I would say I'll start off saying a big namaste to you for asking this question. I'm very happy to answer this.
Okay.
See, we are talking about the two main sources of RE energy today is wind and solar. So when you talk about the reliability, of course, you are talking about the quality of the product. Mm-hmm. So wind turbines which are made in India are manufactured as per IEC standards, which are international standards. And the turbines are certified as per the IEC standards. And the certification process and the certificates, including the manufacturing process of the turbine manufacturers in India for the wind, are again rechecked by NIVE, which is the technical arm of the ministry. And it's a very rigorous process. So as far as the wind turbines are concerned, you can be rest assured that they are of the best quality which are made in India, and they're of the same quality, if not better, which are made in any other part of the world. So as an extension of this, even the balance of plant for the wind farms have been standardized. And there are the wind farms which are installed way back in 1990 are still functioning. And I don't see any reason why the wind farms which are getting installed today will not sustain for the next 25 years. Having said this, I would again draw the attention of the members to the solar industry, where we import panels from abroad. And these panels have no quality standards. There are no project standards. So I get a panel for the price I want. If my tariff is 250, I get a panel for 250. My tariff is 280, I get a panel which is for 280. Tomorrow, if my tariff goes down to 225, still I am profitable because I get a panel for 225. So that is where I think the government will have to really look in, because the quality is important. We cannot allow any substandard products. I think Chirag is absolutely right when he is asking this question. We need to focus on quality and sustainability of these assets. So like we have the RLMM, which is basically which stands for Revised List of Manufacturers and Models for the wind industry. We need to have a similar list that would get published time to time, so that the quality of solar assets also improves. On a lighter side, in one of the conversation when he asked a similar question to me, saying, what do you think about the sustainability of wind? I very jokingly I said, the sustainability of wind depends upon improving the quality of solar products in India. So I'm serious about it now, even though I had said this on a later side. Unless we improve the quality of solar assets, the tariff comparisons keep kicking in, and wind will suffer because of that. So as long as the quality improves, I think we are all fine. I am particularly not against any source of energy. I have wind and solar are same for me, but I think we need to create a level playing field.
Okay. I think I have a few minutes before I thought I'll ask a final question from Parveen. I think you're there. Can you just post a question, Parveen?
I have my question to Mr. Reddy. I think development is the most tricky and most difficult part of the entire value chain in solar and wind. And that's why OEM pushes to IPP pushes to OEM for development. What can we do to make a development business very par with the international standards so that people can rely and quickly enter into without pushing liabilities to each other? What steps, like what is required for this, either policy changes or how should we, because this is the most difficult part of the entire value chain, we feel.
Absolutely. So in one of my initial remarks in the panel discussion, I did mention about unrealistic timelines. When I say the unrealistic timelines, what I mean is this 21 months window, what is being given today as a part of the bidding process is inadequate. In the past, actually, like when the feed-in tariff regime was in place, the tenure of the PPA was 18 months. But it doesn't mean that the projects started or conceptualized and got commissioned in 18 months. So even before actually the sale happened, the OEMs or some of the few EPC companies are used to put in a lot of efforts or in terms of resources, material, etc., finance, etc., in terms of identifying the sites, doing the wind measurements, then acquiring land. Then some of the OEMs even built substations and transmission lines in advance. And only after that, a project or the project teaser was made, and that was given to the sales to go and offer the projects in the market. And so, which means like within that 18 months window where the sales actually closes an order, more than 60% of the development activity is already done. As you are aware, the biggest challenge today is to acquire land and get permits. And if this can be done in advance, so the life becomes easy. But unfortunately, the bidding process does not recognize this. So the policymakers do think that 18 months or 21 months is adequate. So 18 months, when I say it is more to the state bids and 21 months to the central bids. So we need to change this. We need to change this, and just 10 seconds, Jay. We need to change this, and I am personally trying to do this this interaction with MNRE, and I would request every stakeholder in the industry to highlight this and explain this to the ministry. And I'm sure like the ministry will understand this, and we have a new secretary in charge, and so I'm sure like he will take cognizance of these issues, and there would be a rethink on the policy.
Yeah, thank you. Siddharth, could you just add, before we wrap up this session, could you just add your comments?
When we have worked with industry players, we see that the major barrier to this is the lack of demand in the market, because if you develop all this and there is no uptaker who is able to take this asset off your balance sheet, then nobody has an incentive to invest. So in our opinion, if there is a more stable trajectory of demand coming in the wind market, there will be companies that will start investing into this because there will be margin to be made, and IPPs will themselves then start doing this. We also foresee if there is demand. Right now, because there is no demand, nobody knows how much it is. So, and OEMs are the only one who have that demand consolidated. They are in the best position to spread those costs. So that's why some of this has been taken by them. But if the demand trajectory improves, this will get better.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Praveen. With that, I think I will wrap up this webinar, and I thank you all the speakers and the participants for coming here. For some reason, if we have not answered your questions, but definitely we got your emails and we will answer individually your questions. And thank you once again. For the further updates, you can check up our website at ewc.net and Wind Industry and Market Insights. For more information, you can contact us at info@gvec.net. With this note, I'd like to thank you once again for participating and active questions you have asked across, and wish you all the best and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you all.